Ethan Walker shoved his chair back so hard it cracked against the marble floor, and 400 people in tuxedos turned to stare. He laid his napkin on the table, looked the billionaire sitting across from him, dead in the eye, and said 7 words that Ballroom would never forget. "I'm not a project. I'm a father." Then he walked out. But nobody expected what Victoria Sterling did next. 40 minutes later, she found him in the parking garage on his knees in a rented tuxedo, changing a stranger's flat tire. And what she said to him down there changed both their lives forever. Before we go on, comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. And if you believe a man's worth was never printed on a bank statement, subscribe, and stay with me to the end. At 5:40 in the morning, in a small gray house, 11 miles outside Seattle, Ethan Walker was already awake because he had not really been asleep. He sat on the edge of his bed with his elbows on his knees and did the math again. Not on paper. He'd stopped using paper a long time ago because paper made it official. He did it in his head the way a man does when he's afraid of the answer. Mortgage 11 days out. Electric past due, but they gave you a grace period if you called and were polite about it, and Ethan had learned how to be polite about it. The truck needed a rear brake job he could do himself if he could scrape together $60 for pads. And there was the field trip. The field trip was $62. He had learned to keep the number in a separate drawer in his mind. Not because it was the biggest number, because it was the one that mattered. Down the hall, a door opened. Small feet. Then a voice still full of sleep. "Dad." "Right here, Lil." Lily Walker was 9 years old and stood in the doorway in pajamas with cartoon whales on them, her hair sticking up on one side the way her mother's used to. She held a permission slip in her hand like it was a summons. "Mrs. Abernathy says today's the last day." "For what?" "You know for what." Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. "The aquarium thing. The marine biology field trip," she corrected. "It's not a thing. There's a touch tank." "There's a touch tank. You get to touch a stingray." "They let 9-year-olds touch stingrays. There's a lawsuit waiting to happen." Lily didn't laugh. She was watching him the way she'd been watching him for about a year now, too closely, like she was reading the fine print on his face. That was the part that killed him. She'd learned to read him. A kid shouldn't have to learn that. "It's okay if we can't," she said. "Did I say we can't? You did the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you rub your face." Ethan lowered his hands. "Lily." "It's okay," she said again faster. "Marissa's not going either. Her mom said it's a ripoff. $62 to look at fish. You can look at fish for free. There's fish in Puget Sound." "There's fish in Puget Sound," Ethan repeated. "Free fish." He looked at his daughter standing in the doorway, making excuses for him at 5:40 in the morning, and something in his chest folded over on itself. He stood up and took the permission slip out of her hand. "Get a pen." "Dad." "Get a pen, Lily." She got a pen. He signed it against the doorframe, and when he handed it back, she looked at the signature line for a second longer than she needed to. "You'll figure it out," she said. Not a question. A statement of fact about the world. "Dad figures it out." "Yeah," Ethan said. "I will." That was the promise. Not a big romantic promise. Just that one. Dad figures it out. He'd made it to her 5 years ago in a hospital hallway when she was 4 years old and didn't understand yet why they wouldn't let her see her mother, and he had never broken it, not once. Not for a single day. And that promise was the entire architecture of the man he had become. His sister showed up at 6:15 with 2 coffees and an agenda. Grace Walker Ruiz was 42, taught 8th grade math, and had never once in her life let a silence sit there when she could put something in it. She set a cup in front of him at the kitchen table and did not sit down. "So," she said. "No. You don't know what I'm going to say. You've said it 11 times. 12. And I'm saying it again because you're doing that thing where you nod and then don't go." Grace. Saturday night, the Fairmont. It's a charity gala, Ethan. It's a fundraiser. They raise money for the veterans housing thing, and they do this stupid little matchmaking gimmick where they pair people up for dinner and everybody bids on tables. It's rich people playing pretend for one night. But there's an open bar and a fillet, and you would be out of this house for 4 hours. I don't have 4 hours. You have 4 hours. I've got a shift Sunday at 6. Sunday at 6 is not Saturday at 7. That's how time works. I teach math. She pulled out the chair and finally sat. Somebody bought a table and can't fill it. Denise's brother-in-law works the event. He's got 2 seats going empty, and he'd rather put a person in them than look at a hole. That's it. That's the whole thing. So I'm the hole filler. You're a guest. I'm a hole filler in a room full of people who'll ask me what I do, and I'll say, I load freight from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, and drive a shuttle 4 days a week, and they'll say, oh, how interesting, and then look over my shoulder for somebody better to talk to. Grace was quiet for a second. Then, is that what you think happens? That's what happens. When's the last time you tested that theory? Ethan turned the coffee cup a quarter turn on the table and didn't answer. 5 years, Grace said. 5 years, Ethan. You cook, you clean, you fix the neighbor's gutters for free. You sit at that community center on Thursdays, helping other people fill out housing forms. And then you come home, and you sit in that chair, and you watch the ceiling. You are 39 years old, and you're behaving like a man who's already retired from his own life. That's cute. You practice that. In the car, twice. It shows. Ethan. She leaned in. Lily is 9. In 9 more years she is gone. She's going to college, or she's going to Portland with a boyfriend who plays bass, or she's joining the Peace Corps. I don't care, she's going. And she is going to walk out that door and look back, and what she sees in this kitchen is the thing she's going to believe love looks like for the rest of her life. You want her to see a man who gave up everything and called it fatherhood? Ethan's jaw moved. That's low, he said. Yeah, Grace agreed. It is. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, somebody's dog started up. 4 hours, Ethan said. 4 hours. And I don't have a suit. You have a suit. It's in the back of your closet in a plastic bag from the funeral home, and I know it's there because I'm the one who hung it up. She stood, took her coffee, and paused at the door. Get a different one. That one's earned its rest. I went to a rental place in Renton on Friday because the tux was $94, and the suit he'd have had to buy was $300. The kid behind the counter was maybe 22 and kept calling him sir, in a way that made Ethan feel like a piece of furniture being appraised. Special occasion. Something like that. Wedding. No. The kid waited for more. Ethan didn't give him any. That night, Lily sat cross-legged on his bed and supervised the tie. That's crooked. It's not crooked. It's aggressively crooked. She held out her hand. Give it. You don't know how to tie a bow tie. I watched a video. When Aunt Grace said you were going to a fancy thing. She got up on her knees on his mattress so she could reach his collar, and Ethan bent his neck down for her, and she worked at it with her tongue poking out the corner of her mouth. Okay, there. Now it's artistically crooked. Great. Dad. Yeah. Is it a date? Ethan looked at the ceiling. It's a fundraiser. Aunt Grace said they match people up. Aunt Grace talks too much. Aunt Grace says you don't talk enough, so somebody's got to make up the difference. Lily flopped back down onto the bed and looked at him upside down. You should go, on a date, like a real one. Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't feel weird about that. She thought about it. She actually thought about it seriously for about 8 seconds, which was more consideration than most adults gave anything. I'd feel weird, she said. But I'd feel weirder if you never did. Ethan stood there in a rented tuxedo in a bedroom with a water stain on the ceiling, being out-parented by a 4th grader. Okay, he said. Okay. I love you, kid. I know. She rolled over. Don't eat the little food. Rich people food is little, and then you're hungry. Eat before you go. The Fairmont on Saturday night had valets, and Ethan's truck had a bad idle and a piece of gray duct tape holding the driver's side mirror on, and he sat at the light on University Street for a full 30 seconds after it turned green, seriously considering going home. Then he thought about Lily on her knees on the mattress fixing his tie, and he pulled in. The valet was polite. That was almost worse. The kid took the keys and didn't say a word about the mirror, and it was the not saying that landed. Inside, a woman with a tablet ran her finger down a list. Name, Walker. Ethan Walker. 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 Frown. I'm not seeing. I might be under the Ruiz table. Denise Ruiz. Her brother-in-law. Oh. The frown cleared into something bright and terrible. You're the comp. The what? The complimentary seat. Table 12. She smiled at him with 100% of her mouth and none of her eyes. Enjoy your evening, sir. The comp. Ethan carried that word across the lobby like a stone in his shoe. Table 12 was near the back by the service doors, and there were 7 people at it who all knew each other. A man named Bradley Coleman shook his hand with a grip designed to establish something and said, Brad, Coleman Development. And you're Ethan Walker. 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 Brad squinted. Walker Capital. No. Walker and Finn. No. Huh. Brad waited. Everyone at the table waited. I load freight, Ethan said. Overnight out of the Kent facility, and I drive an airport shuttle 4 days a week. The silence that followed was not hostile. That was the thing. It would have been easier if it were hostile. It was polite. It was the silence of 8 people rapidly reorganizing their evening around a piece of information they hadn't planned for. That's great, Brad said. That's honest work. It is. Really the backbone. Brad turned to the woman on his left. Sheila, did you see what they did to the Ballard project? And that was it. 22 minutes into the evening, Ethan Walker had been placed on a shelf. He drank ice water and watched the room and thought about the $94. At 8:15, the lights dimmed, and a man in a headset explained the gimmick. Every guest had a card. The cards had been thoughtfully matched by the events committee, which everyone understood to mean somebody had sorted them by net worth, and after the first course guests would find their match and share the main course at a two-top along the windows. It was silly. It was the kind of silly rich people paid $900 a plate for, and Ethan had already decided he'd sit down with whatever unlucky woman drew the short straw, be pleasant for 40 minutes, and go home to relieve Grace of the babysitting. Then the room changed. It was a physical thing. It moved through the ballroom like weather. Heads turned toward the entrance, in a wave. Conversations dropped a half step, and 3 photographers who had been leaning against the wall all night straightened up at once. Oh, she came, someone at table 12 said. She never comes. She's on the board, she has to. She funds the board, she doesn't have to do anything. Victoria Sterling came through the doors with 4 people behind her, and did not appear to notice that 400 people had just adjusted their posture. She was 36. She had built Sterling Renewables out of a rented garage in Tacoma at 24 and taken it public at 31, and the number attached to her name in the newspapers had a B in it. She wore something dark and simple and expensive, and she checked her watch twice before she reached the stairs. That's Marcus Hale with her, Brad said. CFO, guy's a shark. She looks tired, Sheila said. She looks like she's about to fire someone, Brad said, and everyone laughed. Ethan watched her cross the room and thought without any particular emotion, there goes somebody who doesn't want to be here either. Then the man in the headset came to table 12, checked his clipboard twice, checked it a third time and said, Mr. Walker, table 4 by the windows, your match has been seated. I didn't understand until he was almost there. He understood about 6 feet out when he saw who was sitting at table 4 with her hands folded on the white cloth, and he stopped so abruptly that a waiter had to go around him. Victoria Sterling looked up. You're Walker. There's been a mistake. There usually has, she said. Sit down anyway, they've already poured the wine. Ethan sat. Behind him, he could hear it starting that low, delighted hum a room makes when it thinks it's watching something embarrassing. He didn't turn around. He'd been in enough rooms to know what the back of his neck was hearing. They're staring, Victoria said. Yeah. Does that bother you? Does it bother you? I stopped noticing about 6 years ago. She unfolded her napkin, which is either growth or brain damage, I've never been sure. Ethan almost laughed. He hadn't expected to. She studied him for the moment. You're not going to ask? Ask what? Everyone asks. They get about 90 seconds of small talk out of the way, and then they ask about the Series B or the DOE contract, or whether I think the tax credits survive the next administration. She said it without bitterness, which somehow made it worse. You've got a free pass. Go ahead. Ask me something worth $11 billion. Okay, Ethan said. Did you eat? Victoria blinked. Did I eat today? Did you eat today? She opened her mouth, closed it. I had coffee, she said. That's not eating. It's been a long... It's 8:30 at night. There was a board call that ran. So no, Ethan said. You didn't eat. Victoria Sterling looked at the man across the table from her, and for the first time that evening, something in her face actually moved. Nobody's asked me that in 11 years, she said. That's a hell of a thing to be true. Yeah. She picked up her water glass. It is. The first course came. She ate it. He noticed that she ate all of it fast, the way people eat when they've been running on nothing, and didn't realize how empty they were until food showed up. So, she said when the plates went. What do you do? Here it was. I load freight, Ethan said. Overnight, Kent facility 10 to 6. Then 4 days a week I drive an airport shuttle, SeaTac loop. He waited for it. The pause, the recalibration, the that's honest work. Victoria said, 2 jobs. Yeah. Why 2? Because one doesn't cover it. Cover what? My daughter. And there it was, the first thing all night he hadn't planned to say. How old? 9, Lily. What's she like? Ethan stopped. Because in 5 years. 5 years of parent-teacher conferences, and grocery lines, and church potlucks, and well-meaning neighbors, not one single person had ever asked him that. They asked how's she doing, which meant is she over it yet? They asked is she adjusting? Nobody had ever asked him what his daughter was actually like. He had to reset. She's smarter than me, which is a problem because she knows it. She corrects my grammar. She reads the ingredients on things at the store, and tells me what I'm doing to my heart. He stopped again. She made me a chart, on the fridge. It's a chart of how many hours I sleep, and she colors in the squares, and when I have a bad week, she doesn't say anything about it, she just leaves the marker on the counter where I'll see it. Victoria didn't say anything. Sorry, Ethan said. You asked a question, you got a monologue. Don't do that. Do what? Apologize for the only honest thing anybody said to me tonight. The main course came. Neither of them touched it. Her mother, Victoria asked, died 5 years ago. I'm sorry. Everybody is. That's not what I meant. I know. Ethan turned his fork over. Sorry, that's a reflex. People say it and I say something with a hook in it. It's a bad habit. What happened? And Ethan looked up, because that was the second question nobody asked either. You want the short version or the real one? I've got until dessert. I flew rescue, he said. Airlift. Search and rescue out of a station up north, Mountain Extractions Water Rescue Medevac. 14 years. It was the only thing I was ever any good at. You were good at it. I was very good at it. He said it flatly, no pride in it, a fact about a stranger. 206 missions. I pulled a family of 4 off a sandbar in the Skagit in flood conditions, with about a minute of daylight left. I've got a piece of paper in a box in my garage that says I'm a hero. In a box. In a box. Why in a box? Ethan set down the fork. Because on the 18th of March, 5 years ago, my wife's car went off the shoulder on Route 2 in freezing rain, and it took 2 hours to get somebody to her. And I was 400 miles away in a hangar in Spokane with a helicopter. He heard his own voice come out level and steady, and hated it, because level and steady was what 5 years of practice sounded like. I have spent my entire adult life getting to strangers in under 20 minutes. And when it was her, I wasn't even in the same weather system. Victoria Sterling did not say that wasn't your fault. She did not say you couldn't have known. She did not reach across the table. She said, so you quit flying. I quit flying. Because you didn't deserve it anymore. Ethan's head came up. Nobody had ever gotten there. Not the grief counselor the department paid for, not his sister, not the pastor, not the guys at the station who'd come by with casseroles for 6 weeks and then stopped coming by. Everyone had spent 5 years telling him it wasn't his fault, which was the wrong medicine entirely, because he had never once said it was. The problem was smaller and uglier than that. The problem was that he'd been given a gift, and the one time it mattered, the gift had been 400 miles away, and now every time he heard rotors overhead, he felt like a man who'd been handed something he was never qualified to hold. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Something like that." Victoria nodded slowly. "What did you lose that changed you?" she said. "That's the question I was going to ask you when you sat down. I ask everyone. Almost nobody answers it. Most people tell me about a deal that fell through." "What did you lose?" "Excuse me." "You ask everybody. Nobody asks you." Ethan leaned back. "So, what did you lose?" For a second she looked like she might get up and leave. "My father left when I was 7, she said. Not dramatically. He just started staying at work. It took him about a year to leave the whole way, and I want you to know I was 7, and I could feel it happening in real time, and I could not make it stop. She turned her glass by the stem. And 4 years ago I was engaged. 9 days before the wedding, he sat me down and explained very reasonably over dinner that he'd stopped being able to separate me from the company, that he didn't know anymore which one he'd proposed to. "What did you say?" I said okay. She almost smiled. "That's it? That's the whole thing I said." 11 years of my life, and my entire response was, okay, because I'd been rehearsing for it since I was 7. "And after I worked." She shrugged. "I've built $400 million of enterprise value since he left. I have a house I don't sleep in, and a boat I've never taken out, and I eat dinner over a sink at 11:15 at night, and I am by every metric anyone in this room recognizes an extraordinary success." "That's not what I asked." "I know it's not." "So." Victoria Sterling looked at the man in the $94 rented tuxedo with the artistically crooked bow tie. "So I'm the richest person in this building," she said, "and you're the first one in it who's asked me a question I couldn't answer with a press release." They talked for an hour and 10 minutes. They talked past dessert, past the auction, past the part where the man in the headset started gently trying to move people back to their tables and gave up. She asked him what he cooked, and he told her about Thursday night tacos and the fact that Lily had banned bell peppers by executive order. He asked her what she did that wasn't work, and she said, "I don't know," and then sat with that for a second, like she'd stepped on a nail. He told her about the community center. Thursday nights, 6 to 9, helping people fill out housing applications, because he'd learned during the worst year of his life that the forms are designed to make you quit, and somebody has to sit there and say no, keep going. Box 11 doesn't mean what you think it means. How many people? Depends. 6. 12. Last Thursday it was 19 because a complex on Rainier sold, and everybody got the same letter on the same day. Who pays you? Nobody pays me. Who funds it? Nobody funds it. It's a room and a folding table and me. Victoria was quiet. "That's not," she started. And then a hand came down on the back of her chair. "Vic." Marcus Hale, CFO, smiling. "Sorry to interrupt. Ledbetter's leaving, and he wants 10 minutes before he goes." "He can have 5. He's Ledbetter." "He can have 5, Marcus." Marcus's eyes went to Ethan, and he did the thing. The full scan. Suit, shoes, hands. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met." "Ethan Walker." Marcus Hale. The handshake was 3/5 of a handshake. Then Marcus turned back to Victoria, lowered his voice about 10%, just enough to be technically private, not nearly enough to be actually private, and said, "This is good optics, actually. Somebody already took a photo. Room likes it. Sterling sits down with a working guy. Plays great. We can feed it to Kerrigan on Monday." He patted the back of her chair. "Nice touch, Vic. Very human." And there it was. Ethan felt it go through him, not hot, not fast. Cold and slow the way the bad ones always came. Nice touch. Very human. 67 minutes of the truest conversation he'd had in 5 years, and a man in a $9,000 suit had just filed it under content. Victoria's face changed. Marcus. I'm just saying it plays. Marcus. Ethan stood up. The chair went back harder than he meant it to, and cracked against the marble, and heads turned the near tables first. Then the ones behind them. A spreading turn, and for one long second, the ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic went almost quiet. Victoria looked up at him. Ethan. No, he's right. Ethan's voice was perfectly steady, which was somehow the most alarming thing about it. It plays. That's not... Ma'am, I've been in this building 3 hours, and I've been called a comp, a hole filler, and a nice touch. He picked up his napkin, folded it once, and set it on the table. So let me say the one thing I came here to say, and then I'll get out of everybody's evening. He looked at Marcus Hale. Then he looked at Victoria Sterling, and every single person at every single table within 40 feet heard him. I'm not a project. I'm a father. He walked out. The parking garage was on P2, and his truck was in the corner by the concrete pillar, and the rear passenger tire on the Lexus parked next to it was flat to the rim. There was a woman standing beside it in a gown on the phone saying, "No, I understand, there's a wait. I'm asking how long a wait," in the voice of somebody who had been saying it for a while. Ethan stopped. He was still angry. He was angry all the way down into his hands, and he could have gotten in his truck and been on I-5 in 90 seconds. He set down his jacket on the hood of his truck instead. "Ma'am, you got a spare in the well?" She turned around. "I'm sorry. Your spare. Under the mat in the trunk. It's a donut, it'll get you 40 miles at 50 miles an hour. That's enough to get you home." He was already rolling his sleeves. "Pop the trunk." "Oh no, I've called. They quoted you 90 minutes, and it'll be 2 hours. Pop the trunk." She popped the trunk. So that's how Victoria Sterling found him. She came out of the elevator 11 minutes later alone. No Marcus, no assistant, having walked out on a man named Ledbetter, who had never in his life been walked out on, and she stopped dead on the concrete. Because down at the end of the row, a man in a rented tuxedo was on both knees on a filthy garage floor with a lug wrench in his hand and grease up to his forearms, tightening bolts in a star pattern, while a stranger in an evening gown held his phone up as a flashlight. Victoria stood there and didn't move. The stranger was saying something. Ethan shook his head, wiped his hands on the inside of the tuxedo jacket lining where it wouldn't show, and said loud enough for it to carry, "No ma'am, put it away. Please. 50 miles an hour, no freeway, get it replaced tomorrow. That donut's older than my daughter." He shut the trunk. "Have a good night." The woman drove off. Ethan turned around, and Victoria Sterling was standing 30 feet away in the middle of the parking garage in a dress that cost more than his truck, looking at him with an expression he could not read at all. "You didn't have to follow me down here," he said. "I know. I said what I said. I'm not taking it back." "I don't want you to take it back." "Then what?" Victoria walked toward him. She stopped about 6 feet away, and when she spoke, her voice was not the voice from the ballroom. It was smaller than that, and it shook slightly at the edge, and she seemed to hate it for shaking. 31 people spoke to me tonight," she said. "Every one of them wanted something. Access capital, a introduction, a photograph. 31. She swallowed. "Then a man who has nothing to gain from me walked out of that room, came down here, and got on his knees on a concrete floor in rented clothes for a woman who will never know his name." Ethan said nothing. Marcus said it plays. Her jaw tightened. "He was wrong about which one of us it makes look good. Ma'am. Victoria. Victoria." He shook his head slowly. "You and I sat at a table for an hour, and it was the best hour I've had in 5 years. And I'm not going to insult either one of us by pretending it wasn't. But I know what I am, and I know what you are, and there's no version of Monday morning where this isn't a story somebody tells at your expense. You just decided that. You just decided that," Victoria said, "for both of us. In about 4 seconds. In a parking garage." Ethan opened his mouth and found nothing in it. She reached into her clutch, took out a card, and held it out. He didn't take it. So she stepped forward and pushed it into his shirt pocket herself, and her hand was shaking, and she looked up at him from 6 inches away and said, "Thursdays, 6 to 9, the folding table." What? You said you're there every Thursday. Victoria Sterling stepped back and her voice steadied. So I'll see you Thursday. She turned and walked to the elevator, and she did not look back, and Ethan Walker stood alone in a parking garage on P2 with grease on his hands and a business card in his pocket. 39 years old, absolutely certain of one thing. She wasn't going to come. 5 days later at 6:04 on Thursday evening, Ethan Walker unfolded a card table in the multi-purpose room of the Rainier Vista Community Center and told himself he was not watching the door. He was watching the door. You keep looking up, said Dolores Whitfield, who ran the center, who was 68 and who missed nothing. You expecting the health inspector? No. Then quit it, you're making me nervous. By 6:20, there were 11 people in folding chairs holding the same letter, and Ethan stopped watching the door because he didn't have time to. The complex on Rainier had sold, and the new management company had sent out a notice with a 30-day window and a phone number that rang to a voicemail box that was full. Box 11, he said for the 4th time that hour. Box 11 says household income including all contributing members. It does not mean your son's paycheck if he doesn't live there. It says all. It says contributing. He doesn't contribute if he doesn't live there. Write his name in the margin and put non-resident next to it, and I'll sign it as a witness. You can do that. Anybody can witness. That's the whole secret, Mr. Okafor. Everybody thinks these things are magic. They're not magic. They're just designed by people who've never had to fill one out. At 7:09, the door opened, and a man in a Sounders jacket came in with a stroller, and Ethan felt something go loose in his chest, and he was disgusted with himself for the whole 11 seconds it took to identify the feeling as disappointment. Grace had asked him about it Tuesday. He'd said nothing happened. She'd said Denise's brother-in-law says you knocked over a chair. He'd said the chair fell. She'd said, Ethan, 400 people heard you say you're not a project. And he'd said, then 400 people heard the truth. And gone out to the garage to change the brake pads he'd finally scraped together $60 for. At 7:41, the door opened again. Victoria Sterling came in wearing jeans and a gray sweater and boots that had actually been walked in with her hair pulled back and nothing on her face, and she was carrying 2 grocery bags, and for one long beat, nobody in the room recognized her because nobody in that room read the business section. Ethan stood up so fast his knee hit the table. You came. You said Thursdays. I said a lot of things. You said Thursdays, she repeated and set the bags down. There's coffee cups, creamer sugar, and 4 dozen donuts. I didn't know what people liked, so I got 4 dozen. Victoria. Where do you want me? I don't. Ethan. She said his name quietly, and only once. I have been in 17 meetings since Monday, and none of them were real. Put me somewhere. So he put her at the end of the table with a stack of blank forms and a pen, and said, read box 11. Then read box 19. Then just tell people what the words actually mean. She was terrible at it for the first 20 minutes. She was terrible because she kept trying to solve things. A woman named Raina came in with a 5-day notice, and Victoria immediately started saying, okay, so what we'll do is, and Ethan had to lean over and say low, don't fix it, just read it to her. And Victoria looked at him like he'd told her to stop breathing. I can fix it. I know you can. That's not what she needs at 7:50 on a Thursday. What does she need? She needs one person in this county to sit with her for 11 minutes and not make her feel stupid. Victoria looked at Raina. Then she sat down and put the notice flat on the table between them and said, okay, line by line. I don't know all of it either. At 9:15 after the last person left, Dolores locked the front and came back through with her coat on and stopped dead when she saw Victoria stacking chairs. Ma'am, Dolores said slowly, are you who I think you are? Probably. Huh. Dolores looked at Ethan, then back. Well, you stack a chair right, so I don't care. At 9:40, they sat in Ethan's truck in the empty lot because it had started raining, and she'd sent her driver home 2 hours earlier without telling anyone, which meant that the wealthiest woman in the state of Washington was sitting in a 19-year-old F-150 with duct tape on the mirror, drinking gas station coffee out of a cup that said, Happy Birthday on it. I told Marcus he was out of line, she said. You don't owe me that. I'm not doing it for you. I fired him. Ethan's cup stopped halfway. You what? I didn't fire him. She rubbed her eyes. I wanted to. I'd have to buy out his contract and the board would revolt, and Ledbetter would pull out, and there are 400 people at Sterling who'd have a very bad quarter over my feelings. So no. I didn't fire him. I told him he was out of line and he apologized, and it was the most expensive apology I've ever received because he meant approximately none of it. So nothing happened. Something happened. She looked over. I found out what my company thinks I am. 9 years I've been telling myself I built a place with a soul. And the first time somebody honest walked in the door, my CFO priced him. Ethan sat with that. He's not wrong that it plays, he said. Don't do that. I'm not being noble, I'm being accurate. A woman like you and a guy like me sitting at a table, people are going to make it mean something. And whatever they make it mean, it's going to cost you, and it isn't going to cost me, because I don't have anything for it to cost. Victoria set the cup on the dash. You've got a daughter, she said. That landed harder than she meant it to. Ethan didn't answer for a second. Yeah, he said. I do. Then let's be honest about what you're actually protecting, because it isn't me. At 10:02, she asked what the number on the folding table was. What number? You said last Thursday it was 19 people. Tonight it was 23. Next Thursday. 30, maybe more. The letters went out to 206 units. 206. She was quiet. And it's one man and a folding table. It's one man and a folding table. That's obscene. That's Tuesday. No. She turned in the seat. Ethan, that's obscene. I signed a check 3 weeks ago for $2.1 million to put my name on a lecture hall. I didn't read the paperwork. I signed it between two other things. And 11 miles from that lecture hall, there are 206 households getting evicted by a spreadsheet, and the entire response is you. Don't write a check. Why not? Because checks make people feel finished. He said it flatly. Somebody writes a check and they go home and they've bought themselves out of ever thinking about it again. Dolores has been running that center on nothing for 11 years, and she's watched 40 people do it. Victoria was silent for a long moment. Then tell me what isn't a check. Show up. That's it. That's the hardest one there is, Ethan said. Anybody can write $2 million. Almost nobody comes back on the fourth Thursday when it's raining and nothing's changed and nobody's watching. She looked at him. I'll be here the fourth Thursday, she said. She was. She was there the next one and the one after. And on the 6th Thursday in October, she came in soaked to the shoulders because she'd walked 4 blocks from where the car had to stop, and she said, I read the management company's filing and put a folder on the table, and Ethan said, you read what? And she said, their parents a REIT, and they have a rehabilitation clause in their acquisition financing, which means somebody promised a bank they'd keep occupancy above 82%, which means they cannot actually evict 206 units without breaching their own covenant, which means we don't need to fight them. We need to tell them what they signed. Dolores Whitfield looked up from across the room and said, Lord have mercy. By the 3rd week of November, they had stopped 58 evictions. Somewhere in there, without either of them saying a word about it, it stopped being about the folding table. It happened on a Sunday. He had a rare one off, and she called at 9 in the morning and said, I have 11 hours with no meetings for the first time since March, and I don't know what to do with them. And Ethan said, that's the saddest sentence I've ever heard. And she said, I'm aware. And he said, do you know how to make chili? No. Do you know how to chop an onion? No. Get over here. So Victoria Sterling learned to chop an onion at a scarred kitchen counter in a gray house outside Seattle badly, while a 9-year-old girl watched her with an expression of undisguised scientific interest. You're holding it wrong, Lily said. I'm holding it how he showed me. You're holding it how he showed you 5 minutes ago. You've drifted. She's drifted, Ethan agreed. I've drifted, Victoria said. Fine, show me. And Lily Walker, 9 years old, took the knife out of a billionaire's hand and demonstrated the claw grip and said, curl your fingers so if you slip, you hit the knuckle, not the fingertip. Dad taught me when I was 6 because he says everybody should know one thing that keeps them from bleeding. Victoria didn't say anything for a second. That's a good rule, she said. He's got a lot of them. I bet. At 2:15 that afternoon, Lily asked her the question straight out the way children do. Are you dating my dad? The kitchen went very quiet. Ethan turned around from the stove. Lily. It's a fair question. He stopped. It's a fair question. Victoria set down the knife and turned all the way around to face her, and did not squat down to child height, and did not use the voice, and Ethan noticed both of those things, and would think about them later. I don't know, she said. That's the honest answer. I know I'm here on a Sunday, and I have never in my adult life been anywhere on a Sunday. So something's happening. But I'm not going to tell you it's one thing when I don't know yet. Lily considered this with her whole face. Okay, she said. Okay. You didn't lie. She went back to the counter. Mrs. Kowalski from church lied. She said she was just bringing casseroles. Ethan turned back to the stove very quickly. At 4:40, they ate chili at a table with a wobbly leg, and at 5:10, Lily explained the sleep chart on the refrigerator to Victoria, and at 5:12, Victoria stopped smiling. How many hours is that square? Each square's 1 hour. Greens over 6, yellows 4 to 6, reds under 4. Victoria looked at the chart, then she looked at Ethan. 2/3 of the squares were red. It's a busy season, Ethan said. Don't, Victoria said. Lily said, told you to nobody in particular, and went to get her shoes. It got out on a Wednesday in early December. A photographer got them coming out of a hardware store in Ballard with a bag of drywall screws. And by 11 that morning it was on 3 sites, and by 2 it had a headline, and the headline was not kind. Ethan found out because his shift supervisor at the Kent facility, a man named Ray, who had never once in 3 years asked him a personal question, said, Hey Walker, you know you're on the internet. I'm what? You're on the internet. Ray held up his phone. That's you, right? That's your jacket. The headline read, Billionaire's new accessory. Ethan read it twice. Then he handed the phone back and said, I'm going to go load the 1140. Walker, I'm going to go load the 1140 Ray. By Friday, there were 4 of them. Sterling Renewables CO steps out with local warehouse worker. Sources board concerned about Sterling's judgment, Victoria Sterling's charity project, and the one that finally did it in a business quarterly with a real byline and a real reputation. A billionaire's temporary mistake. Ethan didn't call her. She called him at 11:50 at night, and he was in the break room at Kent with a cold sandwich. Have you seen it? Yeah. Ethan, I want you to listen to me. I'm not upset about me. What? I'm not upset about me. I've been called worse by better. He put the sandwich down. I'm upset because there's a stock price attached to your name, and a 14% of you attached to your net worth. And the journal just used the word judgment. And I looked it up, Victoria. I've been reading about this all week. When they start using that word about a woman who runs a company, it doesn't stop. Silence on the line. You've been readings about it, she said. Yeah. For how long? Since Wednesday. Ethan. Her voice cracked slightly. That's 4 days of your life you spent researching how to be a liability. That's 4 days I spent doing math. Stop doing math about me. Somebody's got to. 2 weeks later, on the 19th of December at 7:20 in the morning, Marcus Hale came to the Kent facility. Ethan came off shift at 6, went out to his truck, and there was a black car idling in the lot, and a man in an overcoat leaning against it who did not belong in a freight yard. Mr. Walker. Mr. Hale. You've got a minute. I've got a shift at 10. This'll take 4. Marcus didn't push off the car. I want to start by saying I like you. I want you to hear that. I've had you looked at, and there's nothing there. No record, no debt beyond a mortgage and a card, no ex-wife with an axe, no lawsuit, no nothing. You are, and I say this admiringly, exactly what you appear to be. Do you understand how rare that is in my world? You had me looked at. Of course I had you looked at. I'm the CFO. It's negligence not to. Ethan set his lunch cooler down on the tailgate. Say the thing you came to say. All right? Marcus straightened. In 11 weeks, Sterling closes a Series D extension at a valuation that will make it the largest private renewables raise in the Pacific Northwest. Ledbetter Capital is the anchor. Ledbetter is 68 years old, he's from Greenwich, and he has already used the phrase personal volatility twice in my presence. Twice, Mr. Walker. That's not a man expressing curiosity. That's a man building a paper trail. So talk to him. I have talked to him. I've been talking to him for a month. Marcus's voice went flat. Here's what I actually came to say, and I'd like you to hear it without deciding what it is first. Victoria Sterling has spent 12 years being the smartest person in every room she's ever walked into, and she has done it by never once giving anyone a place to put a knife. Not once. And now she's given them one. That's on her. No, it's on both of you, and only one of you is going to pay. Marcus stepped forward. Because when this goes badly, and I've done this a long time and it goes badly, she loses her board, her raise, and probably her chair. And you lose a girlfriend. She'll survive it. She survives everything, that's her problem. But she'll never get it back, and she'll spend the rest of her life being introduced as the one who lost the company over a man. Ethan said nothing. I'm not offering you money, Marcus said. I want to be clear about that because I think you'd hit me, and I've seen your forearms. You're not offering me money. I'm offering you the only thing men like us actually respond to. He took out a card and set it on the tailgate next to the cooler. The truth. Do the arithmetic, Mr. Walker. You already do it every night at 5:40 in the morning. Do it about her. He got back in the car. The window came down 4 inches. For what it's worth, Marcus said. I meant what I said at the gala. It did play well. That's what makes it dangerous. If people hated it, it'd be dead already. The car pulled out. Ethan stood in the lot in the dark at 7:29 in the morning, holding a lunch cooler, and it was the 5:40 that undid him. Because Marcus Hale had guessed. He had guessed, and he had guessed right. And Ethan Walker had spent 5 years believing his private arithmetic was the one thing nobody could see. He did not tell her. That was the mistake, and he knew it was a mistake at the time, and he made it anyway, because that's what he'd always done. He'd carried it. That was the entire operating system of the man. Dad figures it out. So for 11 days he was fine. He was so fine that it was noticeable. Grace clocked it first on the 23rd in his kitchen. What did she do? Nothing. Ethan? She didn't do anything. I know she didn't do anything. That's why I'm asking what she did, because you're doing the fine thing. Grace put down the dish towel. You did the fine thing for 6 months after the funeral. You were so fine I almost missed it. You were fine right up until I found you in the garage at 2 in the morning organizing screws by size. They were disorganized. You were disorganized. Grace. You're going to leave, she said. Ethan didn't answer. Oh my God. Grace sat down. You're going to leave. You've already decided. You decided a week ago, and you've been walking around this house being pleasant. That is not. You did it with the department. You did it with the guys. You did it with Pastor Neil. Everybody who's ever gotten close enough to cost you something you have very quietly walked out on before they could go first. And you've called it every noble thing in the book. Responsibility. Protecting people. Doing the math. Her voice rose. It's not math, Ethan. It's fear with a spreadsheet on top of it. You don't know what they're going to do to her. No, I don't. And neither do you. And neither does she. And she's a grown woman with an 11-figure balance sheet, and she gets to find out. That's what people who love each other do. They find out together. They don't have one guy sitting in a truck at 5 in the morning deciding for everybody. She'll lose her company. Then let her lose it in front of you. The refrigerator hummed. Ethan looked at the sleep chart, which had 4 red squares in a row. There it is, Grace said quietly. You already know I'm right. That's why you're not arguing. He went to work. On the 2nd of January at 9:40 in the evening, everything came apart at once. The board call ran 4 hours. Ledbetter's counsel had circulated a memo on Friday about governance and founder concentration risk, which was 6 pages of extremely expensive language wrapped around one sentence, and the sentence was, "We are worried about who she is sleeping with." At 7:51, of Victoria's own board members, a woman she had personally recruited in 2019, a woman whose kids' tuition Victoria had quietly covered for 2 years, said the word distracted. Victoria said, "Say the rest of it, Anne." Anne said, "I don't think there's a rest of it." "There's a rest of it. Say it." And Anne said, "I think the story has gotten bigger than the company, and I don't think you can see that from where you're standing." The call ended at 9:04. At 9:40, Victoria drove herself to Ethan's house, which she had done exactly twice before, and knocked on the door of a gray house 11 miles outside Seattle in a $2,000 coat. He opened it, and she knew. She knew in the first half-second before a word because his face had gone kind. That was the tell. Ethan Walker's face went kind right before it went away. "Don't," she said. "Victoria, don't you say it. Come inside, it's freezing. Don't you dare say it on the porch like a delivery." Her voice broke in the middle. "You had 11 days. You had 11 days, and you didn't say one word to me, and I want to know what you thought you were doing." "How do you know about 11 days? Because Marcus told me tonight?" She laughed, and it was awful. 10 minutes after the worst board call of my life, my CFO stood in my office and told me in a voice like he was doing me a favor that he'd gone to see you in a parking lot on the 19th of December. And you know what I said, Ethan? I said, "That's not possible," because Ethan would have told me. Ethan closed his eyes. "I stood in my own office," Victoria said, "and I defended you to the man who was right." He wasn't right. I was on Thursday, and you know it. They used the word judgment. They used the word distracted. Anne Reyes said the story is bigger than the company, and Anne Reyes has never been wrong about anything in 9 years. She was crying now and clearly furious about it. So he was right about the facts, and he was wrong about the only thing that mattered, and the only thing that mattered was that you were supposed to bring it to me. If I'd brought it to you, you'd have fought them. Yes, and you'd have lost. Maybe I'd have lost. She hit the doorframe with the flat of her hand. Do you understand that's allowed? Do you understand that a person is allowed to lose something on purpose because they've decided it's worth losing? Not 11 years of your life, you're not. That's not your call. Somebody has to make it. Why? She stepped up onto the threshold 6 inches from him. Why does somebody have to make it? Why is it always you alone at 5:40 in the morning, running the numbers for everyone in the county? Who told you that was your job? And Ethan Walker heard himself say it before he could stop it. Because the one time I didn't run the numbers, he said, my wife went off Route 2 in the ice, and it took 2 hours to get somebody to her. The porch light buzzed. Victoria stood absolutely still. There it is, she said quietly. Don't. No. No, we're here now. Her voice dropped and steadied, and it was worse than the shouting. You think that if you calculate hard enough and carry enough and sleep 4 hours a night and never once let anybody help you, you can keep it from happening again. That's not love, Ethan, that's a penance. And I'm not going to spend the next 30 years being the thing you protect. Behind him from the hallway, a small voice said, Dad? Neither of them moved. Lily was standing in the hall in the whale pajamas, and she had heard some of it, and there was no way to know how much. Ethan said, Go back to bed, Lil. Lily didn't move. She looked past her father at Victoria standing in the doorway with her face wet, and then back at her father, and she said the thing that broke him. Are you making her leave? Ethan's mouth opened. Because you do that, Lily said, and her chin was shaking. You did it with Uncle Ray, and you did it with Pastor Neil, and you did it with the flying, and you always say it's fine, and then you sit in the chair. Lily. I like her, Lily said. I didn't want to, but I do. And then she turned around and went back down the hall, and her door shut, and it wasn't even a slam. It was worse. It was quiet. Victoria wiped her face with the heel of her hand. I'm going to go, she said, because I've got a 9 a.m., and because that child should not have to watch this. Victoria. But I want you to hear one thing before I do. She stepped back down onto the walk. Every single person who ever left me told me it was for my own good. My father said it was better this way. Daniel said it was fairer to me. Now you. Her voice cracked one last time and she let it. "You're not doing something different, Ethan. You just have better reasons." She got in the car, and Ethan Walker stood in the open doorway of a gray house with the porch light buzzing and the cold coming in around him at 11 minutes past 10 on the 2nd of January, and understood with the flat total clarity of a man who has spent his whole life being told he was good in a crisis that he had just made the worst decision of his entire life, and had made it, as always, completely alone. He did not sleep at all that night, and at 6:12 the next morning, on the 3rd of January, Ethan Walker went into the kitchen and found the sleep chart gone off the refrigerator. Lily had taken it down. The magnets were still there, 4 of them holding nothing. She came out at 7 for school and put her cereal bowl in the sink and did not look at him. "Lil, I'm going to be late. It's 7 o'clock. The bus is at 7:40. I'm going to be late," she said again, and went and sat by the door with her backpack on in her coat for 38 minutes, so that she would not have to be in the same room as him. That was the first morning. There were 9 more like it. She wasn't cruel about it. That was the thing that took him apart. She still said goodnight. She still said thank you when he made her lunch. She just took the warmth out of it the way you'd turn a burner down, and Ethan discovered that he could stand almost anything except being handled politely by his own kid. On the 8th of January, a Thursday, he unfolded the card table at the community center at 6 o'clock, and there were 29 people waiting and no Victoria. He hadn't really thought she'd come. He'd thought it anyway. Dolores Whitfield worked the room with him until 9 and then locked the front door and then stood in front of him with her arms folded. "You want to tell me what you did?" "Nothing." Dolores. 29 people tonight, Ethan. She did 19 of them by herself last month. You know what Raina asked me at 7:30? She asked me if the nice lady was sick. Dolores pulled her coat on. "So whatever it is you're calling nothing, it's got a body count. She's got a company to run." "Uh-huh. It's complicated." "No, it isn't." Dolores picked up her keys. "It's real simple, and it's real ugly, and you know exactly what it is. And that's why you're standing here at 9:15 at night, stacking chairs I already told you I'd stack." He stacked them anyway. On the 14th of January at 8:40 in the morning, Victoria Sterling sat at the head of a conference table on the 22nd floor and listened to a 68-year-old man from Greenwich explain her to herself. "I want to be respectful," Ledbetter said. "Please don't be. We're behind schedule." "All right." He folded his hands. "Since November, this company has made a series of decisions that are not, in my judgment, financial decisions. You held the Kirkland site instead of flipping it. You turned down the Halverson offer, which was accretive because you didn't like what he said about his cruise. And you have personally involved yourself in a tenant matter in a neighborhood where Sterling owns nothing and earns nothing. These are not the decisions of an operator. They are the decisions of a woman who has become emotional about her own biography. Is that the whole list?" "It's the polite version of the list." "Then give me the impolite one, Walter, because we're both adults, and I've got a 9:30. Ledbetter's mouth thinned. "The impolite version is that you were the most disciplined founder I have ever backed until you started being photographed with a warehouse worker, and every man in my fund has now watched a woman with $11 billion of enterprise value make a series of soft calls in the same 90 days. You may find that unfair. I find it unfair. It is also priced in." Marcus Hale shifted in his chair. Victoria said, "Say the number." "I'm sorry. You didn't fly across the country to describe my character. You came to reprice, so say the number." There was a pause of about 4 seconds, and in those 4 seconds, Marcus Hale saw something on Ledbetter's face that he would think about for the next 9 days. 18% below the November mark, Ledbetter said, with a governance rider. "What rider?" "A 3-person committee with veto authority on capital deployment outside the core business." "You want a leash. I want protection." "You want a leash, and you want me to hold out my own neck for it, and you want me to be grateful because the alternative is worse." Victoria stood up. "I need 48 hours. Take 24. She took 24. That night at 11:10, Marcus Hale did something he had not done in 9 years at Sterling, which was call the CEO at home off the record from his car. "Vic. It's 11 at night, Marcus. I know what time it is. I need to ask you a question, and I need you to not fire me for it. He took a breath. When did the first story run? December 3rd. What day was the Ledbetter term sheet dated? Victoria didn't answer. Because I pulled it tonight, Marcus said. The original draft. It's dated November 19th, and it has the same governance writer in it, and it has an 11% haircut that got crossed out in the second draft. Vic, they wanted a discount before there was anything to be worried about. The story didn't make them nervous. The story gave them a reason. That's a hell of an accusation. It's worse than an accusation. His voice was flat. Kerrigan at the Quarterly. The one who ran A Billionaire's temporary mistake. I had drinks with him in October about something unrelated, and he mentioned, and I did not think about it once until tonight, that Ledbetter's comms firm placed 2 of his last 4 features. The line went quiet. Say it out loud, Marcus. They leaked it, Marcus said. Or they fed it, or they watered it. I don't know which, and I'll never be able to prove which. But somebody has been building a file on your personal life since before there was a personal life to build a file on, and 18% of your company is the invoice. Victoria sat down on the edge of a bed in a house she didn't sleep in. I did it too, she said. You did what? I believed them. Her voice was strange. Anne said distracted, and I went home and lay awake and I thought she's right. I've been soft. I let a man cook me chili, and I let a 9-year-old teach me a knife grip, and I went and stood in a room full of people getting evicted, and I felt something, and I sat in this house, and I told myself that was the problem. She laughed once with no humor in it. 9 years of my life, I've been told the feeling part is the leak, and I finally believed it in the exact week that somebody was picking my pocket, Vic. And I let him go, Marcus. Do you understand what I did? A man stood on a porch and told me he was leaving to protect me, and I told him he was a coward, and he was. And then I drove home and did the identical thing to him with better paperwork. Marcus was quiet for a moment. For the record, he said, I went to that freight yard on my own. She didn't send me, is what I'm saying, in case you ever repeat this conversation. I did it because I thought I was protecting her too. A pause. Everybody in this story is protecting somebody, and not one of us asked permission. On the 20th of January, a photographer followed Lily Walker's school bus. I didn't do anything illegal. He stood on a public sidewalk across from Rainier Vista Elementary with a long lens, and he got 11 frames of a 9-year-old girl in a blue coat, walking with her backpack, and one of them ran on the 21st, under the phrase, the daughter, at the center of Sterling's distraction, with her face blurred, which somehow made it more obscene, because the blur told you they knew. Ethan saw it at 4 in the afternoon, standing in his own driveway. He did not yell. Grace, who was there, said later that she wished he had. He went inside and he sat down at the kitchen table, and he stayed there for 2 hours without turning on a light. And when Lily came home from her friend's house at 6:15, he said, "Come here a second." And she stood in the doorway, still cool, still 9 days into her polite winter. "Somebody took your picture," he said, "outside school." "I know, Marissa's mom saw it. I'm going to fix it." "How?" And Ethan Walker, who had spent 5 years telling his daughter that Dad figures it out, opened his mouth and had absolutely nothing to put in it. Lily watched him not answer. "Okay," she said, and went to her room, and that was the moment, the exact moment, that something in the man finally broke the right direction. He didn't know it yet. He wouldn't know it for 6 more days. Because on the 22nd of January at 4:40 in the afternoon, Lily Walker went into her father's dresser, into the drawer where he kept his watch and his wedding ring and the pieces of paper he didn't look at, and took out a business card that had been sitting under a folded receipt since the 2nd week of October. Then she used Grace's phone, because she knew Grace never locked it. Victoria was between meetings. She answered a number she didn't know because she had stopped screening anything. "This is Victoria Sterling." "It's Lily." Victoria stood up and walked out of the room. "Lily, hi. Is your dad okay?" "No." "Are you okay?" "No." A wet little breath. "He sits in the chair." "What chair, honey?" "The chair in the front room. He does it at night when he thinks I'm asleep. He doesn't watch TV. He doesn't have his phone. He just sits, and Aunt Grace says he did it for a whole year after Mom and I don't remember it, because I was 4, and now I have to watch it. Her voice climbed and cracked. He did it last night for 2 hours. I counted. I counted from 11 to 1. Victoria closed her eyes. Lily, listen to me. I'm not asking you to be my mom. It came out fast, rehearsed a child who had practiced the hard sentence. I know you're not. I had one. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking you to come back because he was different, and I only got to see it for like 3 months, and now it's gone, and I'm the only one who saw it, and nobody believes me. I believe you. Then why did you stop coming? And Victoria Sterling, in a hallway on the 22nd floor, said the truest thing she had said in a month. Because I was so angry at him for deciding my life for me, she said, that I turned around and decided his. That's dumb. Yeah, it is. So fix it. It's more complicated than... Everybody keeps saying that, Lily said. Everybody says it's complicated, and then nobody does anything, and then it's just Tuesday again. Victoria let out a breath that shook. Where is he right now? Work. He's at work till 6. Where is he on Saturday? There was a pause, and then Lily said something that Victoria did not understand at all. Uncle Ray called. Grace found out about the phone call on the 23rd and told Ethan on the 24th, standing in his garage, while he pretended to work on a carburetor that did not need working on. She called her. Who called who? Your daughter called Victoria Sterling on my phone and talked to her for 11 minutes. Grace held up the screen. 11 minutes, Ethan. He set down the wrench very carefully. What did she say? I don't know what she said. I wasn't there. I found the call log. Grace, I'll tell you what I do know. Grace's voice was low and hard. I know that a 9-year-old girl looked at this situation and decided that if the adults weren't going to do anything, she'd have to. She went in your drawer. She had to go in your drawer. Ethan passed your ring to find a card you kept for 3 months and never once used. She stepped closer. You kept the card. That doesn't mean anything. You kept the card. It doesn't. Ray Delgado called you, Grace said. Twice. He left a message about Saturday, and you deleted it, and then you saved his number back into your phone at 1 in the morning. And don't ask me how I know that either, because I've been watching you deceive yourself for 5 years, and I've gotten very good at it. Ethan put both hands on the workbench and stood there with his head down. They're decommissioning 4-1, he said finally. What's 4-1? The airframe. The old Sikorsky out of the North Station. 26 years it's done. They're stripping it and shipping the Hulk to a training school in Idaho. He said it to the workbench. Saturday morning they're doing a last engine run. Guys are coming. Guys who retired, guys who moved. Ray's flying in from Boise. And you're not going. I'm not going. Why? Because I flew 206 missions in that airframe, Ethan said, and the 207th was the one I wasn't in. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Ethan, she said. That's the most honest thing you've said since March of 2020. He didn't answer. Go on Saturday, she said. Not for her, not for Lily, for you. Because if you don't go stand next to that thing, while it's still a thing, you are going to be 60 years old, sitting in that chair, and Lily is going to be somewhere in the world, learning from you, that this is what love costs. On the 25th, Victoria Sterling called Walter Ledbetter's office at 7 in the morning and told his assistant that the answer was no. Not a negotiation. No. At 9:15, she stood in front of her own board and said, I'm going to tell you 3 things, and then I'll take questions. 1. Ledbetter's original term sheet is dated November 19th and contains the same rider and a haircut he later widened. He was going to reprice this company regardless of who I had dinner with. 2. I cannot prove they placed the stories, and I'm not going to allege it, and I want it in the minutes that I said I can't prove it. 3. She put both hands on the table. 3. If this board's position is that my judgment failed in the 4th quarter, then it should be about the 4th quarter, and here it is. In the 4th quarter, I stopped 114 households from being evicted by reading a covenant. Nobody at that management company had read since closing. It cost this company nothing. It generated no revenue. I would do it again on Thursday, and I will do it again on Thursday. If that is a governance problem, then you have a governance problem, and it is standing at the head of this table, and I've been standing here for 9 years, and I'm not moving. Anne Reyes said, Victoria. I'm not finished, Anne. You said the story got bigger than the company. You were right. But you were wrong about whose story it was. Victoria's voice did not rise once. Because I let a man walk away from me in January to protect a valuation that a fund in Connecticut had already decided to cut in November. That's the failure of judgment, not him. That. The room was silent for 11 seconds. Then a man named Ostrowski, who had been on the board since 2018 and had said maybe 40 words total in that time, cleared his throat and said, Are we voting, or are we going to go find another anchor investor? Because I know 2 who'd take this call today, and one of them owes me. The vote was 7-2. At 11:40, on the morning of Saturday, January 26th, Marcus Hale put his head into her office and said, Your 10:30 is done, your 1 o'clock moved, and I want to say something and then I'm going to leave. Say it. When I went to that freight yard, I told him to do the arithmetic. Marcus straightened his cuff. You should probably go tell him the numbers changed. He won't take a phone call. So don't call him. She didn't call him. The North Station was 91 minutes from the city, and she drove it herself, and she got there at 2:06 in the afternoon. There were maybe 40 people on the apron. Old cruise wives, a couple of kids, a folding table with a coffee urn on it, and a 26-year-old airframe sitting on the pad with its panels off and its number stenciled on the tail. They had run the engines at 11. Everybody who'd flown her had gotten a turn to stand in the door. Everybody except one man who had shown up at 10:40 and had not gone near it for 3.5 hours. Ray Delgado, 61 years old, retired 2 years, saw the car and said, Well, that's not a rental. Ethan turned around, and Victoria Sterling walked across an aircraft apron in a coat that was wrong for it past 40 people who all stopped talking at once and stopped 4 feet in front of him. You didn't tell me about today, she said. I didn't tell anybody about today. Your daughter told me about today. Ethan's jaw worked. She shouldn't have called you. She's in, and she did more than either of us. Don't you dare take that from her. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands were not. I turned down Ledbetter on Thursday. You what? I turned him down. 18% below mark and a governance writer, and I said no, and then I stood in front of my board and told them the whole thing, and they backed me 7-2. She swallowed. The term sheet was dated November 19th, Ethan, 2 weeks before the first photograph. They were always going to cut me. You and I spent 2 months rearranging our lives around a story that a man in Connecticut wrote for his own balance sheet. Ethan stared at her. That's not... He stopped. That's not possible. He said a lot of things. So did Marcus. So did I. She stepped closer. And so did you. And yours was the one that cost the most, and I'm here to tell you why. Victoria, you think leaving makes you noble. She said it quietly right at him with 40 people pretending not to listen from 30 feet away. You stood on that porch on the 2nd of January, and you told me you were doing it for me. And I have heard that exact sentence from every person who ever left me. My father said it was better this way. Daniel said it was fairer. And you said it was math. Her chin came up. But you're doing the same thing they did. You're deciding for me. You looked at my life, and you decided what I could survive, without ever once asking me, and the only difference between you and them is that you cried about it in a truck. Ray Delgado, 30 feet away, took his hat off and looked at the ground. That's not fair, Ethan said. It's completely fair. I know what you were trying to do. Her voice cracked open. That's what makes it unbearable. If you were a coward, it would be easy. If you were cruel, I could have gotten over it in a week. But you're not. You're the best man I've ever met in my life. And you have decided that the way you love people is by removing yourself from them in advance. Because it was working. Was it? Yes. Look at me and say that. She was crying now, and she did not wipe it. Look at your daughter's sleep chart and say that. Look at yourself standing on a piece of pavement for 3.5 hours, not going near an aircraft you flew for 14 years, and say the word working to me one more time. Ethan Walker. He couldn't. And that was the crack it came through. I'm not afraid of losing you, he said. Then what? I'm afraid of being loved again. It came out of him like something torn loose. That's it. That's the whole thing. Everybody spent 5 years telling me it wasn't my fault, and they've all been treating the wrong wound because I never said it was my fault. I said I was 400 miles away. His voice went ragged. Do you know what it is to be good at one thing in your whole life? I was the guy they called at 3 in the morning in weather nobody else would fly. And the one call that ever mattered, I didn't get, and I have spent 5 years making sure that nobody ever needs me like that again, because if you don't let anybody need you, you can't fail them. Ethan. And then you showed up at a folding table with 4 dozen donuts. He laughed, and it broke in half. And my kid started sleeping. And I started sleeping. And I stood in my kitchen on a Sunday in November, and I was happy Victoria for about 9 seconds, and then I thought, there it is. There's the thing. Now I've got something to lose again. Victoria Sterling closed the 4 feet between them. Then lose it in front of me, she said. Whatever happens, lose it where I can see it. That's all I've ever wanted from anybody in my entire life, and not one person has ever given it to me. I don't know how. I know you don't. I don't have anything to stop. Victoria, I load freight. Stop. And in front of 40 people on an aircraft apron in front of Ray Delgado, holding his hat in front of 2 mechanics and a retired flight nurse, and somebody's teenage son with a phone he'd already stopped filming with because it felt wrong. Victoria Sterling took the face of a man in a canvas jacket in both hands and kissed him. Not quickly. Not for anybody watching. She kissed him the way a person does when they have run out of arguments and are down to the last true thing they own. Not because he was wealthy, because he was not. Not because it helped her, because it had already cost her 18% and 2 board members and every reasonable thing anyone had advised her since November. She kissed him because he was the first person in 36 years who had looked at Victoria Sterling and asked whether she'd eaten. When she let go, Ethan didn't move. He stood there with his hands half up like a man who had forgotten what hands were for. Say something, she said. There's 40 people watching. There were 400 at the Fairmont, and you gave a speech. Ethan let out a sound that was half a laugh and half something else entirely. And then he pulled her in against him and held on hard, one hand at the back of her head, and over her shoulder he could see the airframe with its panels off, and Ray Delgado wiping his face and pretending it was the wind. Okay, Ethan said into her hair. Okay what? Okay, I'll lose it in front of you. That's the worst yes I've ever heard. It's the only one I've got. I'll take it, Victoria said. Behind them, somebody on the apron started clapping badly and alone, and then a second person joined in, and then it went around the whole group, 40 people applauding 2 exhausted adults on a slab of cracked concrete on a Saturday afternoon in January. Ray Delgado came over with his hat still in his hand. Walker. Ray. You want to go stand in the door before they cut her up? Ethan looked at the aircraft, then at Victoria. Come with me, he said. I don't know anything about helicopters. You didn't know how to chop an onion either. So Victoria Sterling walked out onto the pad in the wrong coat, and Ethan Walker put his hand on the frame of a door he had not touched in 5 years, and he stood there for a long moment with his palm flat against the metal. At 2:41 in the afternoon on the 26th of January, he climbed up and sat down in the left seat for the first time since March of 2020. He didn't say anything. He put both hands on the controls of an aircraft that would never fly again. And he closed his eyes, and Victoria stood on the pavement below the door and let him have it. And 40 people who had all lost somebody at some point in 26 years stood in absolute silence and let him have it too. When he came down, his face was wet, and he didn't bother about it. I've got to call my sister, he said. Okay. And I've got to talk to my kid. Okay. And Victoria. He stopped. The next time I start doing math about you, I need you to come find me. Victoria Sterling put her hand flat against his chest. I always will, she said. That's the deal. You don't get to disappear anymore. That's a hard deal. That's the only kind worth signing. He called Grace from the parking lot of the North Station at 3:20 in the afternoon, and she picked up on the first ring, and he said, "I sat in it." There was a long pause. "You sat in what?" 4-1, the left seat, about 4 minutes. Grace Walker Ruiz, 42 years old and 8th grade math teacher, who had not cried in front of her brother since their mother's funeral, made a sound on the other end of the line that she would deny for the rest of her life. "Are you driving?" she said. "Not yet." "Good, because I'm going to say something and I don't want you on I-5 for it." She took a breath. "It took you 5 years and a 9-year-old and a woman with an 11-figure balance sheet, and you couldn't have just gone to therapy like a normal person." "I went to therapy." "You went to 2 sessions and then you fixed their air conditioner." "It was broken." "Ethan." "Yeah. Come get your daughter," Grace said. "And don't practice a speech in the car. She'll smell it." He got home at 4:55, and Victoria followed him in her own car because she had refused to be sent away, and Ethan Walker stood in his own driveway for 11 seconds, trying to figure out how to walk into his own house. Lily was at the kitchen table with a math worksheet she was not doing. "Hi," Ethan said. "Hi. Can I sit down?" "It's your house." "That's not what I asked." Lily put down the pencil. She looked past him out into the hall where Victoria was standing with her hands in her coat pockets, like a woman who had never once in her life been unsure where to stand, and then she looked back at her father. "Did you fix it?" she said. "No." Her chin moved. "I started to," Ethan said. He pulled out the chair and sat down across from her and put both forearms on the table. "I want to say something, and I want to say it right, so if I get it wrong, tell me." "Deal." "Deal." "I've been lying to you." Lily's eyes came up fast. "Not about facts," he said. "About the important part. Every time you asked if I was okay, I said yes. Every single time since you were 4. And you've known I was lying since you were about 7, which means for 2 years I've been asking you to pretend along with me, and that's not a thing a father should ask his kid to do." Lily's mouth had gone very small. "I did it because I thought that was the job," Ethan said. "I thought the job was to carry it where you couldn't see it. And what I actually did was teach you that if you love somebody, you handle it alone in the dark, and you tell them you're fine." "You sit in the chair," Lily said. "I sit in the chair." "For hours." "I know." "I counted to 2 hours, Dad." Her voice cracked wide open. "I counted, and then I stopped counting because I was scared of the number." And Ethan Walker, who had held it together on an aircraft apron in front of 40 people, came apart at his own kitchen table with a math worksheet between him and his kid. "I'm sorry," he said. Lily got up out of her chair and went around the table and put her arms around her father's neck and stood there while he held on to her, and after about a minute, she said into his shoulder in a very small voice, "I'm not in trouble for calling her. No. I went in your drawer. I know. I saw the ring. I know. I didn't touch it." "You could have," Ethan said. "It's yours anyway. It was always going to be yours." At 5:40 that evening, Lily Walker walked over to the refrigerator, took the sleep chart out of the drawer where she had hidden it on the 3rd of January, and put it back up under 4 magnets. She did not say anything about it. She just put it back. Ethan looked at it for a long moment, then went and got the marker and set it on the counter himself, which he had never once done, and Victoria Sterling watched all of this happen from the hallway, and understood that she was witnessing something she had no vocabulary for. Then Lily turned around and said, "Are you staying for dinner?" "I don't want to intrude." "That's not a yes or no." "She's right," Ethan said. "That's not a yes or no." "Fine." Victoria took her hands out of her pockets. "Yes." "Good," said Lily. "You're chopping." The next 3 weeks were not a montage, and nobody involved would have described them as romantic. On the 28th of January, Victoria's new communications director, a woman named Priya Raghunathan, who had been hired on the 27th, sat across from Ethan at a conference table and said, "I need to know everything embarrassing about you in the next 90 minutes. "Why?" "Because a photographer stood outside your daughter's school. Which means we're past the part where we hope this goes away." She clicked her pen. So, anything. Bar fights, bankruptcies, a cousin with opinions, an ex-girlfriend from 2009 with a phone full of texts. There's nothing. There's always something. I've been working 2 jobs and raising a kid for 5 years, Ethan said. The most interesting thing I've done since 2020 is get a library card. Priya put down the pen. That's actually a nightmare, she said. Do you understand that's a nightmare? Clean is worse than dirty. If you're dirty, I can manage it. If you're clean, every reporter in this city is going to spend 6 months trying to prove you're not, and when they can't, they'll write about your dead wife instead. The room went very still. Say that again, Victoria said. I said what I said. Priya, I'm not being cruel, I'm being early. Priya turned to Ethan. Mr. Walker, somebody is going to call your former station. Somebody is going to pull the accident report from March of 2020, because it's a public document, and it takes $11 and a form. So I need to know what's in it before they do. Ethan stood up and walked to the window and stood there with his back to the room for about 15 seconds. Give us the room, Victoria said. Vic, I really do need to know. Give us the room, Priya. The door closed. Ethan didn't turn around. There's something in the report, Victoria said. There's something that isn't in the report. Okay. It's not a crime. Nobody did anything wrong. There's nothing to find. His voice had gone very flat, the way it went when he was holding something with both hands. It's just that I've never said it out loud in 5 years to one single person, including my sister, including the counselor, including God. Then don't say it to me. Ethan turned around. What? Don't say it to me because a communications director needs it in a file. Victoria stayed where she was. If you tell me on a Tuesday in a kitchen because you want to, not in a conference room at Sterling because it's an asset. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. That's the second time you've given me something back, he said. What was the first? You asked what my daughter was like. He told her 9 days later on the 6th of February at 11:40 at night at his own kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee in front of him and Lily asleep down the hall. March of 2020, he said. I was in Spokane. Everybody knows that part. I'd taken a 2-week detail because they were short and it paid a differential and we needed the money because our furnace had gone out in January and I'd put it on a card. Okay. March 18th was our anniversary. He turned the cup a quarter turn. 9 years. And I'd told Claire I couldn't get back because I couldn't. I was on a rotation. And she said fine. And she sounded fine. And she was not fine. And I knew she was not fine. And I let it go because I had 11 days left on the detail. Victoria did not move. She got a sitter, Ethan said. Grace doesn't know this. Grace thinks Claire was going to her mother's in Wenatchee because that's what Claire told her, because Claire wanted it to be a surprise. His voice did not rise at all. She was driving to Spokane, 4 hours in freezing rain to stand in the door of a hangar and surprise her husband on their anniversary. She never made it past Route 2. The refrigerator hummed. I found out 3 days later, he said, because a state trooper handed me a paper bag with her personal effects in it, and there was a card in it, in an envelope, with my name on it in her handwriting. Victoria's hand went to her mouth. I have never opened it, Ethan said. Ethan, it's in the box in the garage, under the commendation, 5 years. He finally looked up and his eyes were dry and terrible. So when everybody spent 5 years telling me it wasn't my fault, they were talking about the wrong thing. I know I didn't put ice on that road. I know I couldn't have flown in that weather even if I'd been there. That's not the thing. His jaw moved. The thing is that she died driving toward me. She died because I was worth 4 hours in freezing rain to her, and I have spent every day since trying to be a man who is worth that, and I will never ever know if I was. Victoria Sterling got up out of her chair and came around the table and sat down on the floor next to him in a $4,000 suit on a kitchen floor with a cracked tile by the stove and put her hand flat on his knee. Say the rest, she said. There's no rest. There's rest. Say it. Ethan closed his eyes. I don't want to open the card, he said, because if it says she loved me, I don't know how I'll live with it. And if it says something ordinary like pick up milk, like she wrote it in the car in a hurry, I don't know how I'll live with that either. So it stays shut. And as long as it stays shut, I don't have to find out which kind of man I am. Victoria sat on the floor of that kitchen for a full minute without saying anything. Then she said, "You don't have to open it. That's not what people say. People are wrong." She squeezed his knee. "You don't have to open it tonight or this year or ever. But you don't get to keep it a secret anymore because the secret is the part that's been eating you. Not the envelope. The alone." Ethan put his hand over hers. "Okay," he said. "And Ethan?" "Yeah." She got a sitter and drove 4 hours in the ice. Victoria's voice was very quiet. "Whatever's in that envelope, that's already the answer." She wrote the answer with her car keys. On the 12th of February at 9 in the morning, Ethan Walker failed a flight physical. He had gone in expecting a formality. Ray Delgado had spent 3 weeks on him about the training program idea, and the aviation medical examiner in Everett was a woman named Dr. Osei, who had been doing this for 22 years, and she took his blood pressure twice, and then a third time, and then sat back on her stool. "When did you last sleep more than 5 hours?" "I sleep." "Mr. Walker?" "For 4.5. "For how long?" 5 years. Dr. Osei took off her glasses. 162/98, she said. "Resting heart rate's high. You've got the blood work of a man with a very good excuse. I'm not certifying you today." Ethan sat very still. "How long?" "Come back in 90 days. Sleep. Cut the second job if you can, and I know you can't, so cut it anyway. Get the pressure down, and I'll sign you in an afternoon." She wrote something. "You want the truth? I've certified pilots at your age with worse numbers. But you're going to be training kids in the mountains, and I'm not putting a man in that seat who's been running on empty since the Obama administration." He sat in his truck in the lot for 20 minutes. Then he called Victoria, which was in itself the entire point of the last 6 weeks. "I failed," he said. "Failed what?" "The medical, blood pressure, 90 days. There was a pause. "Okay," Victoria said. "Where are you?" "Everett." "Are you sitting in your truck doing math?" Ethan let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I was starting to." "What was the number?" "That I'm 39 and 90 days is May. And by May, the program's supposed to have a curriculum and a hangar, and Ray's going back to Boise in April, and there's no version where—" "Ethan." "Yeah." "Come find me tonight," she said. "That's the deal. You don't do the math alone." He came and found her, and here is what happened when he did, and it was the ugliest fight they ever had. It happened on the 14th of February, which neither of them noticed until afterward in the kitchen of the house she didn't sleep in at 9:10 at night. "So fund it," she said. "No." "Ethan, it's $400,000 over 3 years. It is a rounding error. It's less than the lecture hall I signed for between 2 meetings and never thought about again." "That's exactly why." "That's not a reason, that's a slogan." "You want a reason?" He put down the glass. "Here's the reason. The day you write that check, I stop being a guy who's building something and I start being a guy whose girlfriend built something for him. And every single person in that hangar will know it. Ray will know it. The kids will know it. And in 4 years, when I'm 43, and somebody in a bar asks me what I do, I'll hear it come out of my own mouth, and I won't believe it either. So your dignity is worth more than the program. That's not fair." "It's not fair, it's true, they're different." Victoria's voice went up. "There are going to be kids in the North Cascades in 29 who are alive because somebody trained a crew, and you want to slow that down by 2 years so that men in bars think well of you. You don't get to do that." "Do what?" "Weaponize the mission." Ethan's voice went hard, and it was the first time she had ever heard it go hard at her. "You did the same thing with Ledbetter. You want a thing, so you make the thing the only moral option, and then anybody who disagrees with you is standing in front of a dead kid. That's a rich person's move, Victoria. That's exactly the move." Victoria Sterling went white. "Get out," she said. "Victoria. I mean it, get out of my house." He got out of her house. He sat in his truck at the bottom of a driveway that had a gate on it, and he did not start the engine, and at 9:41, 40 seconds after he had decided he was going to drive home and be very polite for 11 days, he heard himself say out loud in an empty cab, "No." He walked back up the driveway and knocked on the door. She opened it with her arms folded. "I'm not apologizing," she said. "I'm not asking you to. I came back to say I was wrong about one thing and right about the other, and I'm going to do them in that order." Her jaw shifted. "Go." "I was wrong to call it a rich person's move. That was a cheap shot, and I knew it when I said it, and I said it because you had me on the mission, and I couldn't get out." He took a breath. "And I'm still not taking your money." "Ethan." "But I'll take your Tuesday." Victoria blinked. "My what?" "Your Tuesday." He stayed on the step. "You're the best operator I've ever been in a room with. You read a covenant 3 companies of lawyers hadn't read and stopped 114 evictions with a highlighter. So don't write me a check. Give me 8 hours a month and teach me how to build the thing, and let me go raise the 400,000 from 12 people who've got no idea who I'm dating." Victoria stood in the doorway for a long moment. "That's harder," she said. "Yeah, that's substantially harder for me than money." "Yeah," Ethan said. "That's how I know it's the right one." And Victoria Sterling started to laugh, and then stopped, and then put her forehead against the doorframe. "You realize what you just did," she said. "What? You asked me for time." She lifted her head, and her eyes were wet. "Nobody has ever asked me for my time. They ask for money, because money is the part of me they think is real. Marcus asked me for a decision. Daniel asked me for a wedding date. My father asked me for nothing ever, which is its own thing." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist and looked disgusted with herself. 11 years of my life, and the first person to ask for my Tuesday is a man in a canvas jacket standing on my porch. Is that a yes? That's a yes, you idiot. Come inside, it's freezing. 8 days later, on the 22nd of February, Ethan Walker gave the worst pitch in the history of philanthropy. He gave it in a conference room in Bellevue to a family foundation that funded rural EMS, and he had a 9-slide deck that Victoria had made him rewrite 4 times, and at minute 6 he lost his place entirely and stood there in a borrowed jacket with a clicker in his hand. Then he put the clicker down. "I'm going to stop," he said. "I flew 206 missions out of a station that has been down to 2 qualified mountain pilots since 2021. Both of them are over 55. When they go, there is nobody in the pipeline, because the training pathway costs $140,000, and the kids who want to do this work are not the kids who have $140,000. That's it. That's the whole problem. I'm asking for enough to put 6 of them through in 3 years, and I'll tell you right now, I don't know how to run a nonprofit, so half of what I'm asking for is somebody who does." He sat down. They gave him $90,000. He called Victoria from the parking garage and said, "They gave me 90, and she said, "That's 22% of the target in one meeting." And he said, "I lost my place in the deck." And she said, "I know, I could hear it. That's why they gave you 90. By the middle of March, there were 4 funders, and $260,000, and a name on a document. And Ray Delgado deferred Boise for a year, and a woman from the State Aeronautics Division called on her own to ask why nobody had done this in the last decade. Somewhere in there, Sterling Renewables closed its raise without Walter Ledbetter. Ostrowski brought in a fund out of Chicago at 4% above the November mark instead of 18 below. And on the day it closed, Ann Reyes came into Victoria's office and stood there. "I was going to write this down," Ann said, "and then I thought that was cowardly." "Ann," I said, distracted. "On a call in front of 9 people about a woman who paid my son's tuition for 2 years without ever once mentioning it to me." Ann's voice was tight. "And I want to tell you I said it because of the numbers. But I said it because you looked happy, Victoria. And I have been at this 31 years, and somewhere in there I learned that a happy woman in this business is a woman who's about to be embarrassed, and I got in front of it." Victoria was quiet. "That's the most honest thing anybody's said in this building in 9 years, she said. "Are you going to ask for my seat?" "No." Victoria closed her laptop. "I'm going to give you the community division." "The what?" 206 households, Ann. That's what the fourth quarter was actually about, and it's been running on me a highlighter and a folding table, and it can't run on that anymore." She stood. I want it to be a real division with real staff and a real mandate. And I want it run by somebody who knows exactly how fast this company will try to kill it because she almost did. Anne Reyes sat down without being asked. That's either brilliant or the pettiest thing I've ever heard, she said. It's both, said Victoria. Most good management is. Marcus Hale stayed. He stayed, and he was worse than ever, and on the 2nd of April, he stood in the door of her office and said, "The Boston people want a dinner, and they want you to bring him." No. Vic. He's not an exhibit, Marcus. I'm aware I've met him. He changed a tire for a woman who'll never know his name, and I've thought about it approximately 900 times since October. Marcus straightened his cuff. I'm not asking you to bring an accessory. I'm telling you the man raised $260,000 in 5 weeks with a 9-slide deck and no experience. And there are 4 people at that dinner who fund exactly what he's building. And if you keep him in a box to prove a point, you're doing to him what I did. Victoria stared at him. That's growth, she said. It's terrifying, said Marcus. I've started sleeping. I don't like it. Ethan went to the dinner. He wore his own suit bought with his own money, $311 off a rack in Tukwila. And when a man asked him what he did, he said, I run a pilot training program out of Skagit County. And it was true, and he heard himself say it, and he believed it. On the way home at 11:50 at night, Victoria said, How was it? I only did the math twice. About what? Whether I belonged there. And then I remembered you can't chop an onion, Ethan said, and I felt a lot better. The last week of April. Lily Walker did the thing that ended it. She did it on a Thursday at the community center at 7:20 in the evening, in front of a folding table with 19 people at it. When a woman named Raina asked her, Is that your mom? The room did not go silent because rooms in real life don't. Somebody's phone rang. A kid dropped a crayon. Lily said, No, my mom died. That's Victoria. She's my dad's person. Raina said, Your dad's person. Yeah. Lily went back to sorting forms. It's a whole thing. Victoria Sterling, 4 feet away, kept her eyes on box 11 for 11 straight seconds and did not look up, because if she had looked up, she would have been useless for the rest of the night. Later in the truck, she said, Your daughter called me your person. I heard. Ethan, I need you to understand that I have been given awards. I know. Actual awards. With my name engraved. I know. I'd trade all of them, Victoria said, and then said nothing else for 11 miles. On the 19th of May, Ethan Walker went back to Dr. Osai in Everett, 128/82. What changed? She said. I quit the shuttle route. That's it. Ethan thought about the chart on the refrigerator, which had gone 11 straight days green in April, and about the woman who called him at 10:15 every night, and asked in a voice pretending not to be checking whether he'd eaten. Eaten. No, he said. That's not it. Dr. Osei signed the certificate. He sat in the truck and looked at it for a while, and then he drove home, and Lily was on the porch because Grace had told her, and she came off the steps at a dead run and hit him hard enough to knock him back a step. Did you get it? I got it. Can you fly? Not yet. I've got about 80 hours of recurrency and a check ride, and it's going to take till fall. But can you fly? Yeah, Ethan said. Eventually, yeah. Lily let go of him and stepped back and looked at her father in the driveway of a gray house 11 miles outside Seattle and asked him the question she had asked him 100 times in 5 years, the one he had always answered carefully, the one he had always answered with the good version. Dad, are you happy now? And Ethan Walker did not do the math. He looked at his kid and then passed her at the kitchen window where a woman worth $11 billion was standing at his counter holding a knife wrong, and at the chart on the refrigerator with 11 green squares in a row, and at the garage where a box still sat on a shelf with an envelope in it that he had not opened and might not open this year and might open next year and would not open alone. Yes, he said. And for the first time in 5 years, he did not have to decide whether it was true before he said it. The check ride was on the 11th of September, and Ethan Walker failed the first attempt. He failed it on a settling with recovery in the 3rd hour and the examiner, a man named Fenwick, who had 11,000 hours and no personality, set his pen down and said, "You flew that like a man apologizing." "I know. Do you?" "I was behind it from the pedal turn." "You were behind it from the ramp." Fenwick shut the folder. "Mr. Walker, I've read your file. 206 missions. You've got better hands than I do. So I'm going to say the unprofessional thing, and then we'll never discuss it again. You don't fly like a man who forgot how. You fly like a man asking permission." Ethan sat in the right seat with his hands on his knees. "Come back Thursday," Fenwick said. "And when you come back, fly it like it's yours." He called Victoria from the ramp at 4:50 in the afternoon, and the first thing he said was, "I failed." "Okay. That's it. Okay." "You called me in under a minute," Victoria said. "Ethan, in January it took you 11 days to tell me a man came to your job. You just failed something and dialed my number before you got the door open. I don't care about the check ride." "I care about the check ride." "I know. Thursday." "Thursday. Then I'll be at the fence on Thursday. You've got the Chicago call on Thursday." "I've got a phone," Victoria said, "and a fence." He passed on Thursday at 11:20 in the morning, and Fenwick signed the temporary certificate against the side of the aircraft. And when Ethan came through the gate, Victoria Sterling was standing at the chain link in a coat that was once again entirely wrong for a helipad, next to Ray Delgado, next to Grace, next to a 9-year-old who was now 10 and had made a sign. The sign said, "Dad figures it out." Ethan looked at it for a long moment. "That's not fair," he said. "Ed." "It's my sign," said Lily. "I can put whatever I want." The first class of the North Cascades Rescue Aviation Initiative started on the 6th of October with 6 cadets, $480,000 raised from 19 funders, 2 aircraft on loan, and Ray Delgado, as chief instructor at a salary, he described publicly as insulting and privately as the best money he'd ever taken. Not $1 of it came from Victoria Sterling. Every Tuesday from 7 to 11 at night, she sat at Ethan's kitchen table with a legal pad and taught a man who loaded freight for a living how to build an organization that would outlive him. "Your board's wrong." "My board's fine." "Your board is 4 pilots and a retired flight nurse. That's a bar. That's not a board." She tapped the pad. "You need a lawyer, an accountant, and somebody who's fired a person. And none of them can be a pilot, because pilots will vote to buy an airframe every single time, and you will be broke in 19 months. Ray's going to hate that. Ray's going to hate it out loud for 2 weeks and then get over it. Ray's not the problem." She wrote something. "You're the problem, because when this gets hard, you're going to want to fix it alone at 5:40 in the morning." Ethan looked at her across the table. "You planning on saying that to me for the rest of my life?" "Yes," Victoria said. "That's the arrangement." On the 18th of November at 9:40 at night, Walter Ledbetter called Victoria Sterling's personal line for the first time in 10 months. She let it ring twice. "Walter." "Victoria, congratulations on the raise." "You've had 10 months to say that." "I have." A pause on the line, the sound of a very old man deciding to be honest one time. "I'd like to participate in the next round." Victoria sat down slowly. "Say that again." "The Chicago Fund's terms were fair. You closed above the November mark. The Community Division has generated 4 regional partnerships and a piece of state legislation, which I'll admit, I did not model." A dry breath. "I'd like to participate." "Walter, in January you told me I made soft calls because I'd become emotional about my own biography." "I did." "And now?" "And now?" Ledbetter said, "The soft calls appear to be the reason the company is worth more." Victoria let 11 full seconds of silence go by. "No," she said. "I beg your pardon. No, thank you. I appreciate the call, and I mean that." She kept her voice completely even. "You didn't reprice me because of a photograph, Walter. You drafted the rider on November 19th, 2 weeks before there was anything to photograph. The photograph just gave you a story that let you say it out loud without embarrassment." The line was very quiet. "You knew," she said. "That's not the part that ended it for me. Everyone in this business does arithmetic. The part that ended it is that you used a warehouse worker and a dead woman and a 9-year-old girl's face on a website as leverage on a term sheet, and then you told me it was about discipline. Victoria, I'm not angry. That's what I want you to hear. I'm not angry, and I'm not going to say a word about it publicly, and if we're both at something in the spring, I'll shake your hand. Victoria stood up. But you're not in this company. Not this round, not the next one. And I want you to know exactly why, because I think you've gone 30 years without anybody telling you. And why is that? Because you were wrong, Victoria Sterling said. Not immoral. Wrong. You looked at the most disciplined founder you ever backed, and you decided that the moment she cared about something outside a spreadsheet, she was leaking value. And I let you make me believe it for 6 weeks, and in those 6 weeks I lost the only person who ever asked me if I'd eaten. Her voice did not rise. I got him back. That was luck. And I'm not putting your money in my company, Walter, because I don't ever again want to sit in a room where the smartest man at the table thinks that part of me is a defect. She hung up first. Then she sat in an empty office on the 22nd floor at 10 past 10 on a Tuesday night and laughed out loud alone for about 4 seconds and then called a man who was almost certainly asleep because he had a 6 a.m. brief. He picked up on the second ring. You okay? Ledbetter called. And I said no. Good, Ethan said, and yawned, and there was absolutely nothing else in his voice. No calculation, no flinch, no arithmetic. And Victoria pressed the phone hard against her ear. You didn't even ask how much, she said. Wasn't going to change the answer. The envelope came out of the box on the 18th of March. Nobody planned it. That was the only way it could have happened. Ethan had gone out to the garage to find a socket, and the box came down off the shelf because it was in the way, and he stood there with it in his hands for about a minute, and then he carried it into the kitchen and set it on the table where Lily was doing homework, and Victoria was pretending to answer email. Both of them looked at the box. Neither of them said anything. It's the 18th, Ethan said. I know what day it is, said Lily. Do you? I've known what day it is since I was 5, Dad. Ethan sat down. He put both hands flat on the lid. There's a card in here, he said. From your mother. It was in the bag the trooper gave me. I've never opened it. Lily put her pencil down very slowly. Never. Never. Why? And Ethan Walker, who 11 months earlier could not say this sentence to a licensed counselor, said it to a 10-year-old at his own kitchen table, without his voice going anywhere. Because I was scared of both answers, he said. I was scared it would say something enormous, and I'd have to carry it. And I was scared it would say something small like a grocery list, and I'd have to find out that I wasn't worth what she was doing that night. Lily thought about that with her whole face the way she did. That's the dumbest thing you've ever said, she announced. Victoria made a sound into her coffee. Thanks, Lil. No, I mean it, that's genuinely the dumbest. Lily leaned across the table. She was driving 4 hours in ice, Dad. She already told you. The card's just the receipt. Ethan sat back. Your grandmother's going to have opinions about how blunt you are. Grandma's the one who taught me. He opened the box. The commendation was on top in a folder, and under it was a paper bag folded over twice, and inside that was an envelope, cream-colored, gone slightly soft at the corners, from 5 years of being not opened with Ethan, written on the front in handwriting that stopped the whole room. He held it for a while. You want us to leave, Victoria said. No. You sure? I've done the alone version, Ethan said. It took 5 years and it didn't work. He opened it with his thumb, badly tearing the flap. Inside was a card with a picture of 2 ugly birds on the front. The kind of card you buy at a drugstore in a hurry because you've decided something at 4 in the afternoon and you're leaving at 5. And on the inside in blue pen, in a fast slanted hand, it said, Ethan, 9 years. I got a sitter, and I'm coming to you because you never ask me for anything, and somebody in this marriage has to make a scene. Don't make a big deal of it. Just be surprised. See, and underneath in the same pen, in a different hurry, as if she had picked the card back up on her way out the door. P.S. Milk. We're out. You always forget. Ethan Walker read it twice. Then he laughed. He laughed so hard, he had to put his head down on his own kitchen table, and it turned into the other thing about halfway through the way it does, and Lily came around and got under his arm, and Victoria sat down on his other side and put her hand on the back of his neck, and the three of them stayed there like that for a while. "Both," he finally said. "It was both." "What was both?" Lily said. "Both the things I was afraid of. It's the enormous one and the grocery list. Same card." He wiped his face with the heel of his hand. 5 years. 5 years I sat in a chair in that room, and it was both, and it was fine, and it was ordinary, Victoria said quietly. "Yeah. That's what you were actually scared of." Ethan looked at her. "Say that again." "You weren't scared of the answer." She said it gently. "You were scared she'd be a regular woman who bought a card at a drugstore and needed milk. Because as long as it stayed shut, she could stay a reason. And a reason is easier to live with than a person you just miss." Ethan didn't answer for a long moment. Then Lily said, "Can I read it?" He handed it to her. She read it about 4 times. Then she said, "She has my handwriting." "You have hers." "That's what I said." "It's not what you said, but okay." "Dad." "Yeah." "Can I keep it?" Ethan Walker looked at his daughter, who had been 4 years old in a hospital hallway, and who had taken a chart down off a refrigerator in January and put it back up in February, and who had gone into a drawer past a wedding ring to make a phone call that saved her father's life. "It's yours," he said. "It was always going to be yours." She put it on her wall that night. Not in a drawer. On the wall over the desk where a person sees it every day. Which was, Victoria thought, the entire difference between that child and the 2 adults raising her. On the 2nd of May, at 4:11 in the morning. Ethan Walker's phone went off with a tone that had not gone off in 6 years. He was flying in 11 minutes. A father and 2 teenagers had gone off a trail above Cascade Pass in the dark, and one of them was on a ledge with an open fracture, and the county's 2 qualified mountain pilots were one on medical leave and one 4 hours out, and the third name on the sheet, added in November, was E. Walker. Victoria woke up when he sat up. "What is it, why?" Call out. "Real one. Real one." And here was the moment the whole year had been building toward, and neither of them saw it coming, because it did not look like a moment. It looked like a woman sitting up in bed at 4:11 in the morning, with her hair in her face. Victoria Sterling said, "Go." That was it. That was the entire thing she said. No, be careful. No, is the weather okay? No, do you have to? Ethan stopped with one boot on. "You're not going to ask me anything. You're the best there is at this, and there's a kid on a ledge." Her voice was steady, and her hands were not, and she let him see both. "I'll be terrified the entire time. That's mine to carry, not yours. Go." He got the kid off the ledge at 6:52 in the morning. It took 3 approaches. The first 2 he waved off because the light was wrong, and the downdraft off the east face was doing something he didn't like. And the second wave-off cost 11 minutes, and 11 minutes is a very long time when a 19-year-old is bleeding on granite. On the ground, a deputy said something on the radio about pushing it. Ethan keyed the mic and said, "Negative. We do it right or we do it twice." Third approach. He put the skid within 4 feet of a ledge, the width of a dining table, with a 200-foot drop off the toe of it, and held it there for 90 seconds. And Ray Delgado, 62 years old, running the hoist in the back, said afterward, to anybody who would listen, that in 40 years he had seen maybe 3 men hold an aircraft that still. They had the kid at Harborview by 7:40. At 9:15 in this crew room, a woman came in with a coat over hospital scrubs and looked around and said, "Which one of you was the pilot?" Ethan stood up. She was the boy's mother. She had driven from Wenatchee, and she did not thank him. Not right away. She stood in front of him with her mouth working for about 4 seconds, and then she said, "They told me it took 3 tries." It did. Why? And Ethan Walker looked at a woman who had driven a long way in the dark towards somebody she loved, and something went through him that he had no plans for. "Because the first 2 weren't safe," he said, "and your son needed me to be there for the 3rd one." She put both hands over her face. He drove home at 11 and slept until 4 in the afternoon. And when he came out, Victoria was at the kitchen table with a laptop she had not opened, and Lily was on the floor with her back against the cabinet, and Grace was in the chair. The chair. The one from the front room, which somebody had dragged into the kitchen at some point that morning, and nobody had explained. "Have you all been sitting here since 7?" Ethan said. "No," said Grace. "Yes," said Lily. Lily, what we were. Ethan looked around his kitchen. "That's the chair," he said. "It's a good chair," said Victoria. "It's wasted in there." And that was how the chair from the front room ended up in the kitchen, where it stayed permanently with people in it. The gala was on the 14th of June, at the same hotel, in the same ballroom, and Victoria Sterling had said no to it for 11 months, and then said yes in April, for one reason. "They asked me to speak," she said. "So speak. I don't do this. I've turned this down every year since 2019. "So why'd you say yes?" Victoria didn't answer that until the car on the 14th at 7:40 in the evening. "Because last year I sat in that room and let a man call you a nice touch," she said, "and I didn't stand up. And I've been carrying that for a year, and I'd like to put it down." Ethan was wearing his own suit. $311 off a rack in Tukwila, worn twice since. Lily had fixed the tie on her knees on the bed exactly as she had a year ago, except that this year she was 10 and taller and did not need the mattress. At the door, the woman with the tablet ran her finger down the list. Name, Walker, Ethan Walker. Walker. Her face changed. "Oh, Mr. Walker, you're at table 1. "I'm sorry. Table 1, sir, with Ms. Sterling." She smiled, and it was a different smile than last year, and Ethan noticed and decided not to feel anything about it, which was itself the whole year in one gesture. Marcus Hale intercepted him by the bar. "Walker." "Hale, I've been instructed to say something, and I'd like to get it over with." Marcus set down his glass. "The Boston group's in. 2 of them are funding your second cohort, and one of them told me on Tuesday that you're the only person he's met in 9 years who asked for less money than he offered. They offered too much. Yes, that's the part he can't stop talking about." Marcus straightened his cuff. "I told you to do the arithmetic in a freight yard in December. I've thought about that a great deal." "You were trying to protect her." "I was trying to protect the company, and I told myself it was her, which is exactly the kind of lie a CFO gets paid to be good at." He picked the glass back up. "For what it's worth, I was wrong about which of you was the asset. That's not a compliment, that's still a balance sheet." Marcus paused. "Yes," he said. "It is. I'm working on it." At 8:50, the lights came down, and Victoria Sterling walked to the front of a ballroom of 400 people, who all had opinions about her, and she did not use a podium, and she did not use notes. "A year ago," she said, "in this room at that table by the window, a man I had never met asked me if I'd eaten." The room went quiet, in a way rooms rarely do. I want you to understand how strange that was. I had spoken to 31 people that night. Every one of them wanted access capital, an introduction, or a photograph. And then a man in a rented tuxedo asked me a question that my own mother had not asked me in 11 years, and I did not know how to answer it, so I said, "I had coffee." Somebody laughed. He said, "That's not eating." More of them laughed, and the laugh had something else underneath it. Later that night, Victoria said, a very senior person in my company described that conversation out loud, near enough for him to hear as good optics. And that man stood up and said, "I'm not a project, I'm a father," and walked out of this ballroom, and I have thought about it every day since. She let that sit. And then he went down to the parking garage, and instead of driving home, he got on his knees on the concrete in rented clothes and changed a flat tire for a woman he'd never met, who to this day does not know his name. 400 people did not move. I'm supposed to talk about this foundation's work tonight, and I will, and it's on the card at your table. But first, I'd like to say the thing I came to say, and it's about all of us in this room, and I'm including myself first. She looked out. We are extremely good at generosity that costs us nothing. I wrote a check for $2.1 million 3 weeks before I met him, and I signed it between 2 other things, and I never thought about it again. That's not generosity. That's accounting with a nice feeling attached. 11 miles from the building. My name is on 206 households were being evicted by a spreadsheet, and the entire response in that county was one man with a folding table who was not being paid and had not been paid for 4 years. Somebody's chair creaked. So here's what I've learned in 12 months, and then I'll sit down. People think success is what you build. I built $11 billion of it, and I ate dinner over a sink at 11:15 at night for 9 years. Her voice stayed even. The hardest thing I have ever done was not the Series A, and it was not taking a company public at 31. The hardest thing I have ever done was letting one person see me on a night when I had nothing to offer him, and no way to be useful to him, and no press release to hide behind. I had to be shown how. I was 36 years old, and I had to be taught by a man who loads freight and a child who was 9. She found Ethan at table 1. Sometimes the person who saves you, Victoria Sterling said, isn't the one who pulls you out of the water. Sometimes it's the person who reminds you that you're still alive enough to be worth pulling. She sat down to applause that went on a great deal longer than anyone had planned for, and Brad Coleman of Coleman Development at table 9 was seen to stand up, which Grace would bring up for years. At 10:40 out on the terrace, Ethan said, I had a whole thing. You had a what? A thing. Planned. For tonight. He put his hands in his pockets. And then you gave that speech, and now anything I say is going to sound like a guy following a symphony with a harmonica. Victoria turned around. Ethan Walker. Yeah. Are you about to do what I think you're about to do? I was. I had a plan. Ray helped, which was a mistake because Ray's idea involved a helicopter. Of course it did. Lily vetoed it. She said it was trying too hard, which from a 10-year-old is a devastating piece of criticism. He took a breath. And then Grace said the only thing that mattered, which was that you've had 400 people watch you your whole life. And what you've never once had is somebody ask you something when nobody was looking. He got the box out of his jacket. So there's nobody out here, Ethan said. That's on purpose. There's no photographer, there's no crowd, and I want to say up front that this ring cost $1,100, which is what I could do, and I'm not apologizing for it because I know what you're worth, and it isn't that either. Victoria's hand went to her mouth. I'm not going to promise you a good life, he said. You've had a spectacular one, and I can't compete with it. Here's what I've got. I will never again decide something about your life without you in the room. Not to protect you, not to spare you not at 5:40 in the morning with a coffee. If it's bad, you'll hear it from me the same day. That's the whole offer. That's everything I have. Ethan. Victoria Sterling. He got down on a stone terrace on the same knee he'd had on a parking garage floor a year earlier. Will you marry me? She said yes before he finished it. She said it over the top of the question, which she would be teased about for the next 30 years. And then she was down on the terrace with him, with both hands on his face, and she said it 4 more times against his mouth. Then she pulled back. There's a condition. There's a condition. There is a condition, and it's not negotiable. Victoria's eyes were streaming, and her voice was absolutely level. Lily is not a stepchild. Not in the paperwork, not at the table, not at a school event, not on a form, not ever. She's not something I acquired with you. I want to ask her myself tonight in a room with just her, and if she says no, I'll wait a year and ask her again. Ethan sat back on his heel. You planned that, he said. I've had it written down since February. You've had it written down. I run a company, Victoria said. I write things down. Lily said yes in the coat room at 11:05 at night, and what she actually said was, took you long enough, and then hugged Victoria Sterling so hard around the middle that a woman who had built $400 million of enterprise value in 4 years had to sit down on a bench and hold on to a child in a green dress and be temporarily incapable of speech. Then Lily said, Are you going to change your name? I don't know yet. Why? Because if you're Victoria Walker, there's going to be 3 Walkers, and one of us has to answer the phone. They married in October at the community center because Dolores Whitfield said she'd break the fire code for one afternoon, and nobody argued with Dolores. There were 91 people. Ray Delgado. 6 cadets, 4 of whom had never worn a tie. Ann Reyes, who ran the community division and who cried harder than the bride. Marcus Hale, who did not cry, and who spent the reception explaining donor-advised funds to a mechanic. Raina from the fourth Thursday, and Mr. Okafor, who had kept his apartment because of Box 11, and Dr. Osai from Everett, who had signed a certificate in May, and had been sent an invitation with a note on it that said, "This is your fault." Grace gave a toast that lasted 4 minutes and destroyed the room in the first 30 seconds because she opened with, "My brother told me once that he was only ever good at one thing," and then had to stop and start again. Lily walked Victoria down the aisle. That had not been anybody's idea but hers. They put the chart on the refrigerator in the new house, which was neither of the old ones, a place halfway between the hangar and the city. 4 bedrooms, a bad kitchen. They were going to fix themselves and a driveway with no gate on it, which had been the one thing Ethan asked for, and the one thing Victoria understood immediately. Ethan flew. 4 days on 3 off, plus the program. And in the second year, the North Cascades Initiative graduated 6 pilots, and in the 4th year, one of them a 26-year-old named Salazar, who had been a wildland firefighter and had never in his life been on an airplane before he was 22, pulled a family of 4 out of the Sauk and flood conditions with about a minute of daylight left. Ethan heard it come over the radio at the hangar. He sat down on a tool chest and put his head in his hands, and Ray Delgado stood there and let him, and then said, "You know that's yours, right?" "That's his." "That's his because it's yours," Ray said. "Take the thing, Walker. Just once in your life, take the thing." Lily Walker went to college 9 years later, and on the morning she left, she stood in the kitchen with a duffel bag and looked at the refrigerator, which had a chart on it that had been green for so many years that nobody had marked it in a long time, and she took it down and put it in her bag. "That's mine now too," she said. "You've got a lot of my stuff. You gave it to me." Her father stood in the doorway of a house with no gate on the driveway, 48 years old, with his wife's hand on his back, and did not do any math at all. "Dad," Lily said from the car. "One more time." "Don't." "Are you happy?" And Ethan Walker, who had once been a man who answered that question carefully, who had once been a man who rehearsed the good version in a chair in a dark front room at 1 in the morning, who had spent 5 years believing that love was a debt you paid alone, and in advance said the only thing that was true. Yes, because losing someone you love can change your life, but it does not get to end your story. Because the person who saves you is almost never the one who pulls you out of the water. It's the one who sits down across the table and asks whether you've eaten. And because a man's worth was never printed on a bank statement, and it never will be, and everyone who ever whispered in that ballroom was wrong about who at that table had nothing.